Training an advanced AI model can now cost billions of dollars. Not millions, billions. Companies like Microsoft and Google are investing massive amounts of capital to train these systems. Thousands of GPUs, massive data centers, weeks of continuous computation. But here's the problem. Not everyone can do this. In fact, almost no one can. When people think about AI, they think about ideas, better models, smarter algorithms, but that's not what limits the system. This is not a technology problem. It's a capital problem. Because training a model today doesn't just require talent. It requires infrastructure. And infrastructure requires money. A lot of it, which means the real question is not, can you build a better model? The question is, can you afford to train it? And most companies can't. AI training is becoming one of the most expensive processes in the world. Not millions, billions. And that changes who can compete. When AI models get larger, they require exponentially more compute, more parameters, more data, more training time. Take companies like Microsoft or Google when they train a frontier model. They don't just run code. They deploy thousands of GPUs across massive data centers, running continuously for weeks or months. That requires enormous infrastructure, compute clusters, cooling systems, energy at industrial scale. So the system scales like this. Bigger models gives more compute gives more infrastructure. More infrastructure gives higher cost, and the key point is, cost does not grow linearly. It grows exponentially, which means every new generation of models is dramatically more expensive than the last. At some point, this becomes a hard limit, not a technical limit, a financial one. Training a frontier AI model can cost hundreds of millions and increasingly billions of dollars. And that cost is not optional. You cannot train the model without the compute. You cannot get the compute without infrastructure. And you cannot build infrastructure without capital. So the bottleneck becomes clear. Money, not ideas, not talent, capital. And capital does not scale equally across companies, which means access to AI training is no longer open. It is restricted. Once training costs reach billions, a filter appears. Only a few companies can pass it. Microsoft can invest billions in infrastructure and train models that most companies cannot afford. Google can scale AI training because it controls both the infrastructure and the capital required. OpenAI depends on massive financial backing to sustain the cost of training large models. But for everyone else, the situation is different. They cannot invest billions. They cannot build infrastructure. They cannot train at scale. Most companies are locked out. And this changes the structure of the entire industry. Because once only a few players can train models, they don't just compete, they control access. And everyone else becomes dependent on them. So the system reaches a point where it stops being open, not because innovation slows down, but because the cost becomes too high. And this is where the real bottleneck appears. It's not compute, it's not talent, it's capital. because only a few companies can afford to invest billions in training infrastructure. Only they can build the systems required. Only they can scale. And this is where control emerges. Because once access depends on capital, the system becomes exclusive. So this is not just a story about AI. It's a story about money. Because when scaling depends on billions of dollars, and only a few companies can afford it, power follows the same path. Money gives access, gives control. But once that structure is in place, most companies are no longer competing, they are dependent. Which means the future of AI is not decided by innovation alone. It's decided by who can afford to train it. And this is the industry code.